Hello.
Hey,
How you feeling?
fucking terrible. So
I
bad.
know.
It's just like I'm like negative 1 million energy level.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
You're
same
yeah.
the same as the last time you asked,
Yeah.
but actually
Worse.
worse.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. For me,
Yeah.
it's never how are you feeling? It's just like how lean are you? And then I already know where your dopamine level is.
No, but doing all right, you know. Doing
Did
the
the weather
damn thing,
did
getting
the
it
weather
done. What's that?
did the weather like is it much darker? I don't know if Ohio's
Yeah,
like
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's dark. It like 5:30. It's pretty much getting
yeah,
dark, you know,
same.
which
Yeah.
doesn't really do anyone any favors.
Best time of year. Did you get some I got some questions. I got some decent questions. Did you get any questions in the question box?
I didn't put a box up because I saw that you did, so I just let you take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me set this. We're gonna do this here. We're gonna go. There we go. We'll let a few people get on here. We'll let some people come in.
Yeah.
Um, for those of you
My
joining, our intention was to do a functional health supplementation chat. So actually talk some protocol stuff and some supplement items.
yeah.
I know we.
One second.
So we'll start with Sonia's questions when she gets back,
I'm
and
back.
then okay,
The
cool.
doorbell rang right as I like logged. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're all good. We're all good now. Do you want to start now with the questions and then
Yeah,
let people
yeah, yeah.
like subjects? So the first one I have is what can I take for anxiety if I don't want to take prescribed medication?
Okay, that's a good question.
So this is kind of a good one. I think for me, I always like to start with lifestyle first. Kind of like a big one. What are we actually like doing with lifestyle? What does lifestyle look like? If somebody is like kind of, I think they're 12 hours that they're like awake, like they're 7 a.m. to 6 a.m. They're just going all the time. I'll probably try to unload some of that if they can. If they can't, then I'll utilize some supplementation. I like to use things that are more like calming. So any sort of like adaptogens that are going to be more calming on the body. I use a lot of ashwagandha. If somebody's doing a lot more like a day, I use the Sensorol ashwagandha for more daily use, and then I'll use like KS66. Right? Is it KS66? Is the
Yeah,
nighttime
KSM 66.
KSM
Well, flip it. So we want to do Sensorel at night.
Central at night? Got it. Just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, at night, and then the
yeah,
KS during the day.
yeah. So yeah. So the question really becomes like, well, why are you anxious? You know what I
It's
mean?
a loaded.
Um, it's environmental factors, but our body's designed to regulate that excitatory response, inhibitory response. So like if you it's one thing if you have something that you're anxious about, but a lot of people are anxious about like nothing,
Yeah.
which or everything. So at that point you got to think, okay, well there's something that's not allowing our body to balance this the way that it should. So it's not like, oh, I have a test coming up for my class later. Like, okay, well, that might make you anxious.
Yeah.
But, oh, I'm just anxious all the time. That's a different, you
It's a
know, it, right.
yeah.
So, yeah, adaptogens are good. If you want to go a step further, like using that like GABAergic pathway, so like theanine works, GABA can work. Um, those would be inhibitory without making you just want to sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
Trancor is
there,
another really series.
yeah,
Trancor. That one's
yeah,
especially with somebody who has like that kind of like for any calm like revive like not necessarily working. Trancor seems to be better for clients who have maybe like an anxiety disorder versus high stress.
right. And we'll use Morphicom too if we have. Morphicom's a great one too, if especially if you know there's a cortisol issue because that has that higher phosphatidylserine dose in there. So the only thing one caveat there is like we want to be careful when we're trying to mess with cortisol too much if we don't know if the person has a high cortisol, low cortisol. So you gotta be
Yeah.
careful with that. But cool.
I have high anxiety and low cortisol, and I think sometimes those things get confused. And if you crush your cortisol down thinking that that will help with your anxiety, you can put yourself in a really bad place. Once you're there, it's a lot harder to come out. You know that, Austin.
Yes. I bet you my cortisol is low right now.
I was like, you're probably there right now.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure of it.
This is another one, when to use a probiotic.
Okay.
One of the next.
Okay, I'll hit this one first then.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the most obvious time to use it would be after you've depleted bacteria. So like SIBO protocol, Candida protocol, something like that. Because we're using the antimicrobials, which the idea is to kill that dysbiotic bacteria, but it's going to kill, it's going to kill some of the good bacteria. And a lot of the time that good bacteria is already low to begin with, right?
Say that.
So we want to repopulate with, generally for things like that, we're using like a high dose multi-strand type of probiotic that's going to be really, really potent. And then we might use like a more resistant probiotic during the actual kill off. So like the Saccharomyces we use because it's kind of more resistant to being killed. And then, I mean, there are other times like, get a GI map. Like sometimes you do get them where they just have low normal bacteria and they may just benefit from a probiotic and fermented foods and resistant starches and like all that stuff. But what about, here's a question though, like to piggyback this, when do we maybe not want to use these things?
Yeah. So probiotics can be a little bit tricky when it comes to working with just like prescribing when a person would use it, right? Because you don't want to be using it when someone's having severe like lower abdominal bloat, like they're waking up in the morning, they're already having that. The risk that they have such an overgrowth population that if you put in basically fuel for that, they're gonna overgrow. We can also have overgrowth of specific strains like Bacillus, which overgrows very quickly. And you'll commonly see that in a probiotic. And it's actually one of the opportunistic bacteria that can overgrow and create SIBO down the line. Someone's dealing with stomach acid specifically as well, like they're using PPIs and they start adding like probiotics in their benefit bacteria, their good guys are a little bit less able to survive in that environment, and the opportunistic bacteria fucking love that shit. So you start to have that imbalance as well. So I don't like to use probiotics unless somebody's specifically saying that they're coming to me and they're having like traveler's diarrhea, or I'm using something like Saccharomyces boulardii specifically, because Saccharomyces alone, this is important to know too, because Saccharomyces is a yeast strain. So if you have Candida and you're reading the back of or you're dealing with something like that, and you just grab like chronic yeast infections, you grab a regular probiotic from the store and it has Saccharomyces in it, which you'll see some of these strains. Understand that that is not necessarily Saccharomyces boulardii, and adding in that yeast-based strain could be good for somebody who doesn't have yeast infections, but for you, it might be adding more fuel to the fire. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
a balancing act with all
Yeah.
of it, really.
Yeah. I think you and I are probably pretty similar in that here's the thing, like you don't need, like, probiotic is not like a maintenance supplement. Like you don't need to take a probiotic if you're functioning normally. It's not like a staple GI supplement that you would take. So I see people do that a lot. or they just arbitrarily throw in the probiotic because they're having gut issues, and that's not what you want to do. So you got to be careful.
Another thing too, with UTIs and yeast infections, because that was another question I got too. I have chronic yeast infections, or chronic UTIs. What do I do? And this kind of plays into it. It's important to understand the strains as well. I think it's a Lactobacillus reuteri is how you say
Yep.
it, and that
I
is
don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but right.
the people at GI Map are rolling in their grave right now. But it's RC14 is the strain that I really like. And you can just buy that specific strain, because sometimes if you're buying, or like Women's Ultra Pro Flora, those specific strains are really good for UTIs. And you can actually put a little bit like in a little like dish with some coconut oil, and you can swab the vaginal lining with it. And that is really good at preventing UTIs, especially if you're having a chronic issue. It's normally something else going on. So pH changes, getting that in, which if you're having a pH change in the body, your taking probiotic might not necessarily make it to the vaginal canal, you know? So going
Yeah.
up is probably your best way to go with that.
Right. So you house different concentrations of different types of bacteria in different locations. So
Yeah.
that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and your stomach is more acidic at the top, and then as it moves through your body to the colon, it's going to become less acidic. So
Right.
understanding specifically why it's important to take different bacteria are going to survive in different environments. So if you're having an upper GI issue versus like inflammation in your colon, if you were to take a probiotic for those things, they would be different strains anyways, because you want to make sure that they're actually targeting the areas that you want to target.
Right. Yeah. When you look at, so that's, like when you look at a GI map, a lot of what you're seeing is more reflective of the intestinal tract, because there's not a lot of bacteria that survives in the stomach. So, keep that in mind.
And mine too, GI maps are extremely helpful, but they could change day to day. So depending
Right.
on
Oh
what,
yeah. I mean, you could take it 5 days in a row and get 5 different readings.
if they were recently sick, that'll also affect things. If they were recently vaccinated, that will affect things. So keep that in mind. I'd say
Yep.
for when having GI maps, I think that we're very good about like being specific with like something like a Dutch, for lab work the day before this. But I think that take into consideration that you want to make sure you're testing during accurate time for a GI map as well. So being mindful of those things that would change the gut microbiota. Like for example, a client comes to you and then you put them on a whole new diet that week, and then their GI map comes and the next week you test them. It's going to be
Right. Yeah. And that's why you should always look at trends and symptoms. Like if somebody has a bad day and then they have a loose stool, that's not indicative of a, GI issue. Now, if they're peeing out their butt every day and then
yeah,
you get a bad GI map back, well, there's a trend,
yeah,
right? That's a chronic thing. It's not an acute reaction,
yeah.
so we have to keep that in mind for sure.
Yeah, like times of your cycle when motility is going to slow down, if you're naturally going to be more constipated with that time, you can expect there to be a higher population of specific strains because things are moving through a little bit slower. It doesn't necessarily mean a flagged GI map doesn't necessarily mean SIBO. SIBO is like very specific, and I
Right.
think
Yeah.
it's a nice and
Yeah.
so. Okay, this next one is adrenal support, question mark. So very in-depth question.
Okay. So, well, let's just we'll break it down into your two main, okay, well, we'll say three areas. So you have, do you have enough adrenal response? Do you have too little adrenal response? And then what is your pattern? Okay. And I guess you could probably throw a fourth one in there, and like looking at the difference between free levels and metabolized levels of like cortisol, if we're talking like a Dutch test. So first and foremost, like we said earlier, before you start trying to manipulate cortisol, you should know what your cortisol is. So A lot of people, and we do this a lot, like
Yeah.
we'll use an AM cortisol on lab work. It gives you something. We can kind of look at it, we can match it up with symptoms, we can get an idea. It's not foolproof. It's going to change. It could be lower yesterday or higher tomorrow, whatever, right?
Yeah. Ask,
Um,
like
right.
around labs, ask specifically, what was your morning like? What was your like morning of your labs? Because if they had a stressful morning and they're scared of needles and they were getting pricked, like all those things are also going to affect cortisol. So keep that.
Yeah, 100%. So again, chronic versus acute reaction. We have to look at the difference. So adrenal support, adaptogenic herbs, things, like ashwagandha, for example, pretty much safe for everyone. Like it's not really going to raise you up or down too much. It's going to be more of a resilience, give you more resilience to stress. That's kind of the idea of adaptogenic. So something like that is probably going to be fine for most people. If we're looking at higher cortisol people usually are the more wired type. They have potentially more anxiety. They potentially have irregular, sleep patterns. It's a very heightened state. Whereas a low adrenal, that can be like the tired and wired feeling or it could just be straight fatigue where they're just dead ass tired all the time. So with low adrenals function, one thing to keep in mind is your ability to respond to stress is very, very poor. And the reason for that is because you don't have any resources. So like it's a feeling, the best way to describe it when you're really crashed is that apathy is one, right? So like extreme apathy is very like low adrenal-esque. Two would be um you just you just are you can't cope with stress very well. Like you're presented with the littlest thing and your ability to perceive it and cope with it is very, very low. Obviously, recovery from like training and exercise and stuff's going to be shitty. You're going to have fatigue. That's
Like
more like
another
low
really
adrenal,
that will
right?
go.
And there's where we might use potentially like a glandular supplement to get a response. We might use like I really, like the mushroom extracts and different things like that are potentially helpful for those people. Whereas in the higher adrenal, we're thinking like inhibitory stuff. So GABA, maybe serotonin, so like 5-HTP, ashwagandha, maybe phosphatidylserine to bring those things down. So, you know, those we want to differentiate between the two different types of situations first. If you
Yeah.
don't know, maybe use an adaptogenic herb, but do not start trying to manipulate things too
Yeah.
much.
I like cortico 5 and B6 too. Just kind of like gas on, especially if a person's dealing with a lot of fatigue. Meaning like they would be trending towards that lower cortisol, lower neurotransmitter profile. Typically that's like one I'll use. Otherwise, if a person kind of swings back and forth, I do what Austin says. I play it safe, especially if I don't have a Dutch. I'll use kind of just a really good all around product that has adaptogenic herbs. I like the use of mushrooms like lion's mane, stuff like that. There's,
Yeah,
it kind of is like this open question of like, it depends. But I think keeping in mind adrenal support is so much, even like vitamin C, like it's so much more than just, I'm going to take an adrenal supplement. There's so many systems
right,
that go with that, that
right.
it's kind of like for all of that. I would say if you are thinking that you are having some sort of like severe adrenal dysfunction, like your blood sugar swing, fatigue, low desire, low life, it's get tested and know what direction to go, where and how throughout the day, because people's patterns are also going to be different. So making sure that you're supplementing around where their patterns need the support is going to be important. So for example, somebody might come up in the morning and then down at night. And one of the common things that you'll see is a person will maybe have a flipped pattern, especially I've dealt with a lot of like night shift workers or people that have just kind of like, they would consider themselves night owls. And in that case, it's not that they need to totally come down. It's that they need to come down at the right times and they need to go up at the right times. And normally it's a game of whack. So the higher we can get them up in the morning, the lower they can go at night.
Drop.
And then we
Yep.
support that more with things like orange blue blockers at night, and like I like to use the happy light in the morning, so really bright light exposure, and I might put them in front of that for like 20 to 30 minutes. And then so you're also supporting the awakening response through the eyes, the neurotransmitter response through that, which also helps keep things on. It's also going to stimulate blood glucose as well to kind of be in the right pattern, because if you're working with a flipped adrenal pattern, you're good, which would affect your circadian rhythm, you can bet that your blood sugar regulation is also going to be skewed and slightly.
Right. Yeah. So, and honestly, like supplements aside, you can regulate regulating your pattern just via lifestyle is, and your body kind of knows what to do from there. Like it's really like Sonia said, like you want to give your body that awakening response via light exposure, via good sleep and wake times. Like I know, like you said, night owl. Like when people tell me that, I'm like, okay, that's because you have somewhat adapted to that pattern. We're really designed to go to sleep when it's dark and to wake up when it's light. Like that is what our neurochemicals and that's what our adrenals are designed to do. So we're not designed to go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and wake up at 11 o'clock. Like you can adapt to that to some extent, but it's not optimal, right? So, a good sleep and wake time is good. Like that's a great start for people. Yeah. And that might be, like 10 p.m. or something like reasonable. Like you don't have to go to bed at 8, but something reasonable. And I tell a lot of people too, like that are really off, we'll scale it like 30 minutes at a time, maybe, and just kind of like try to move them back into that pattern. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow, I have more energy in the morning. Okay. Well, because you're waking up at the right time.
Yeah.
So,
and it's
so just,
there's adrenal issue, have some sort of hormonal issue going on as well. It's kind of like this swinging pattern. And find that supporting hormones during that time too can also be extremely helpful, because the more we can support things like our calming hormone or our vitality, also going to help during that time. Little simple things like intentionally having fun, touching people, massage, like just like little things to get all those neurotransmitters moving in the right direction as well can also help just kind of like turn things on so you're not suffering during that time, because adrenal fatigue is brutal.
Yeah. And secondary to those things, making sure your gut and liver and methylation are supported, because you have to be able to metabolize these chemicals. So we may have, for example, we may have enough production of something. We just may be insensitive to it as like on a receptor level, or we may be not metabolizing it. Like a really common thing that we see all the time is plenty of free cortisol, but really low metabolized cortisol. So like this person's just they are not metabolizing the cortisol. Gut issues, sluggish liver, which is what, like 99% of the cases. So,
save money and pay for coaches, support your liver and your gut, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, there you go. Cool.
And with weight loss too, right? Like your metabolism your liver plays a huge part in your metabolism. They say like 90% of your metabolism is in your liver, just because it has so many processes inside of the body that need it to work well. And when those don't work, like down to your thyroid, it will regulate your metabolism. So keep that in mind. This next one is how do I get my period back? This is kind of
well, I'll tell you what, if you just listen to the last one that we just said, you're on a really good path to getting your period back.
Yeah.
This, because what? Again, 99% of the people who come in have a low progesterone. They're not ovulating, so on and so forth.
From your hypothalamus to your pituitary down to your ovaries, there's the part of the messenger system has turned off as a protection mechanism, because your body thinks that you're in a place that it shouldn't be for a long period of time. So it's just like, this isn't the right time to make a baby, and it's shut everything down. So it's kind of getting a period back, I don't think is probably one of the easiest things we do, in my opinion. I don't know about
I would say.
It's just about taking time. But if you're trying to get your period back, I always feel like starting with taking your BBT just to see, you might not have ovulation, but there might be some slight,
Right.
and then then you can start to support your luteal phase and then your follicular phase with things like primrose oil, and during your follicular phase, and then things like Progon B or Chastity during your luteal phase. That can start to help get those systems moving in the right direction. And then you might see more of a change and more of a change, and you can do that. I don't use a lot of seed cycling, Austin. I don't know if you do. I just haven't seen it.
It doesn't really have much evidence behind it. Um, and frankly, you can throw all the chasteberry and Progon you want at somebody, but
Yeah.
if you're not in a low enough allostatic load, like stress environment, it's just not going to matter at the end of the day. And like you said, time is really the biggest thing. And we see huge differences. Like sometimes we'll get a client that comes in month in, 3 weeks in, like whatever, we get a period, good to go. Other people are months, months to restore a period. And a lot of it really boils down to what's their back history like how chronic has it been? And then also how good is your buy-in to this process? So a great example would be, and I might have told you this one, this was just like a consult I did. It wasn't like an ongoing client. Person had worked with another coach for a long time. They tons of labs, tons of biofeedback, like they did all the things. And then they went on vacation for a couple weeks and didn't track anything and didn't do anything, and all of a sudden they got their first period in 3 years.
Yeah.
Well, why? Well, because all of a sudden there was a gigantic stress dump and they ovulated.
Yeah.
And they had a period.
More than any other part of healing healing in the body, the period is the most woo-woo responsive. It really is. Like it
Right.
really is, like you really have to kind of like be good in your own skin and be okay in your own mind and really believe in the process. I noticed the biggest change in people when they can let go a little bit. Their body is like, I'm safe. It doesn't matter if you stop training, if your mind is still on, just have to get it. It's like trying to stare at it. Like, why isn't it here yet? And it's like, want to come out, you're freaking
Right.
out. It's the most, that's where things like mindset stuff, like journaling and therapy, stuff like that can be extremely helpful when a person has had this hormonal dysfunction or even fertility issues. Kind of play into the same thing as well, as far as like, are you ovulating or not? Where's your body at? I will put a note to this too. When you do start to get your period back, your body has not been hearing those hormones for a long time. It hasn't been feeling some of those feelings. A person typically does not just go from no period to a 28-day cycle with no issues. They had normally have to go through this like heavy periods or irregular periods, or now they're 24 days and 20 days, and then they're 18 days, and then they're 28 days, and then they're 28 days, and so on and so forth. So just getting it back the first step, and then regulating things comes with that, because estrogen does turn on quicker than other hormones. Sometimes it turns back on, and now there's just enough progesterone to get a cycle, but now we have estrogen dominant cycles, which are heavy. And then the body normally, again, continuously supporting during that time, then the body will normally start to regulate with a good ebb and flow. So
Yeah. And it's always, people get a little concerned sometimes because you haven't felt the PMS symptoms in a long time. So like, something's wrong. I'm like, no, you just haven't had a period in 5 years. Like this is okay.
Yeah. When I got mine, I don't want this anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, so, and a big thing, and you kind of alluded to this, is, and it's really a lot of the time, it's not an adherence issue to these plans. Like we are setting up a protocol, whatever it might be, and I get people, they follow it to the T, and I have to explain to them, like you said, that buy-in. It's really buy-in. You can nail everything. You can be 100% adherent, but if you're not at peace with whatever your trauma is or whatever your demons are, It's not going to matter. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not training. I should have a period. I'm like, well, you're not training, but you're sitting at home worrying about why you're not training.
Yeah.
So
Not
it
training
makes a big difference.
to a person. Like that's another thing too. Like, oh, not like, oh, we say like training is down 2 days a week, kind of like this like across the board thing. But that can add so much to a person versus just saying, okay, let's do 4 or 5 RIR, you know what I mean? Moving their training volume down or having them do like a different, whatever they're training, just moving the volume down or moving the intensity down can also be another way to lower the load without increasing more stress to a person. Because if a person has been the type of person that just moves and moves and moves all day, sometimes telling them to settle down will create a bigger stress response inside of their body.
Sure. So I did have a couple questions in my box here. So let's, someone asks, pros and cons of using a greens supplement versus intaking real food. So, um, I don't see that there's anything wrong with supplementing with a green supplement. One thing to think about is the concentration. So like green supplements are generally dried, they're dehydrated, right? So you got to, whatever the amount of powder is, they've taken this fruits and vegetables or whatever they are and they've dried them, so you're getting a higher concentration. But even then, it's not as much as it might seem on paper. So if you're getting this like little like 3 gram scoop of greens that's completely dehydrated down, it's not equivalent to a bowl of blueberries. Okay. So it's fine as a supplementary item. It's fine, especially if you're having like GI issues and maybe you can't intake a lot of fruits and vegetables because of maybe like the soluble fibers or whatever it might be. So I think that those are for volume reasons. Um, Additional antioxidants and polyphenols that you may have a difficult time getting through food, but it's certainly not something that I would just like go out and replace it if you can eat whole food.
Yeah, I agree. I think that another thing to add to that is being really mindful what is in your green supplement, because a lot of these green supplements also will add in probiotic and prebiotic fibers, probiotic strains and prebiotic fibers. And again, if you are taking that over a long period of time, what I will see in clients is, oh, it helps me go to the bathroom and then it gives me the runs. And then it's this because you're high dosing probiotics every single day in the perfect environment for them to overfeed and overgrow. So be very careful that I don't want to say a lot, some green supplements can actually cause a lot more GI distress long term. So just be mindful if you are starting to have that reaction, or being mindful of what's actually going inside of your body, like high doses of probiotics. So
Yeah, a lot of them will have like chicory root or inulin fibers or things like that they're going to ferment and potentially cause issues. So 100% agree. So
yeah,
somebody asked, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do think sometimes if a person really lacks variety or they have some GI distress, there are really good quality greens that you can add in for the variety factor. But in general, it's not something I'd have a person buy.
Sure, agree.
What was that, Tom?
Somebody asked about thoughts on cannabis use during contest prep. We could just say cannabis use in general, I suppose. Um, so first
I
things first, there's a lot of different strands. So like there's going to be different effects from different strands. It's not like it's a universal thing. So there's that to keep in mind. Second thing is I am I am in the camp of I have enough anecdotal data to show that it's not a good solution for sleep
yeah.
for people. Um, okay, so here's the thing. People are like, okay, I take it and I sleep better. Well, here's why. You sleep better because it's reducing latency period because it's calming you down. Rewind back to the beginning. Why are you not calm and able to fall asleep in the first place? So if you take two people, one that has a good sleep hygiene, good circadian rhythm, and falls asleep normally on their own, as they should, they are going to have better sleep quality, more REM sleep, more deep sleep without it than with it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just that it's like saying this. It's like, is it better to get no sleep or is it better to get a lower quality sleep by taking a drug or a supplement? Well, yeah, it's probably better than no sleep, right? But it's not optimal, right?
Yeah. I 100%
So,
agree with that on recovery apps as well. So like Whoop and Oura Ring, you'll start to see that change. The night that a client is typically using edible, their recovery is a lot lower than a night that we can get them to sleep on their own. And they're normally feeling better with better blood glucose levels as well. I don't like the use of edibles as I'm all for the use of cannabis. However, just like Austin was saying, if you are using it, like if you're going out with friends and you're in prep and you just want to like smoke because you can't drink, great. But using it in terms for sleep, I typically see less recovery, worse blood glucose levels, and then lower like Whoop or Oura Ring scores the next day as well. And I like to just support adrenals and the wake and light systems like we were talking about. Like, what does your morning routine look like? If you're having a hard time sleeping, like let's maximize your wake up routine and let's maximize your wind down routine and let's see if that can help first, because you need all the recovery you can get because you're so low in micronutrients and macronutrients during a prep that we want to make sure that your recovery is absolutely on point with the biggest pillar, which is sleep.
yeah, agreed. So, if it's outside of a sleep environment and you occasionally use it recreationally for fun or for maybe some like anxiety relief during the day or something, I could definitely see application, just not for sleep. Just don't, it's just not a good option. You're band-aiding,
Your band-aid.
So, yeah.
Still side really good, but we'll wait another day for that.
Let's see here. I don't have, those were the only couple questions in the actual question box. Let me scroll through this feed and see if there's any more. We covered quite a few actually. We just hammered a bunch of questions there. That was good.
Someone said, "What's that?"
What's what?
What's what? I feel like we missed something. What's
Which part? Which what?
Hamza Badadu? Well,
Yeah. Are you coming to PEC?
yeah. I don't
I
miss a
figured.
piece. Actually, I missed that
Yeah.
one piece. It was just like expensive to fly out to Nashville. And
Was
Mahiro, yeah.
not
But
sure
it's
what's.
going to be awesome.
Yeah, Tampa's good because Florida's like easy to get to for everyone, and there's so many flight options. So it's a good location. The Dallas one was a good location. It's
Yeah.
just anywhere that's touristy or has a big airport is pretty solid.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be good. And then we have that online coaching consortium
Yeah.
right butted up to that. So there'll be a couple. I'll be in Florida twice.
Isn't that coaching? Wait, when are you going
That
to,
one's online, but the
do you
shows and we gotta.
talking about that online?
Well, I guess. I mean, I think it. I didn't know if I was gonna announce it, but I guess I probably will eventually.
Consider yourself announced.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Any other questions anyone
I
has that
think
are
we do have one here. Austin, are you competing in Illinois in 3 weeks? I am and would love to meet you in person. I just competed in Illinois last weekend. That's exactly where I was at. I was in Chicago. So I will not be competing in Illinois in 3 weeks. I was in Illinois last weekend.
and how did
That is, what's that?
and how'd you do?
Oh, well, I think I did pretty well.
Yeah, you cleaned
You know,
house.
yeah. So
Really. What is your opinion on PPIs, proper protocol to recover from acid reflux issues? I think I'll just start with saying it's important to understand if you have high or low stomach acid despite having acid reflux. they can mimic each other. So I like to start somebody on just a basic baking soda test, and I have like a questionnaire as well to see kind of where they're ranking on if they have high stomach acid or low stomach acid. I'm just going to throw a number out there, but I'd say about 80% of the people that come to me with acid reflux honestly have a low stomach acid issue that's maybe exacerbated by something like drinking, or eating out or something like that, or they will get acid reflux in between meals, which is typically a sign of lower stomach acid as well.
Yeah. So I just did a Q&A, which I'll post here soon. It's got to get edited and stuff, but I actually went over all this. So for the person asking, just look out for my next Q&A because that was on there. So it's one of the questions. So if you want more information on that.
And you'll see that people will take more Tums and Rolaids and they'll live off that, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. They have other GI issues with that. So we want
the problem with this question too is that like the obvious component is like reacidifying the stomach, but the issue is that a lot of these people also have a bacterial issue at the same time. So like it's not just stopping the PPI or taking betaine or whatever, because a lot of the time that it's been such a chronic issue that there is dysbiosis. So we have a two-prong problem, which is probably SIBO or H. pylori or both.
Especially because the acid-loving bacteria live higher up, like we were saying earlier. And so if you are chronically in a state of lower fat, you are going to get a chronic state of dysbiosis inside of the body, specifically in the regions, and then moving all the way down. So
yeah, because a lot of people, especially men, tend to have even more issues with this because they generally have higher acid requirements. They eat more protein, stuff like that. So I rarely am I getting someone's like, hey, I've been taking a PPI for 6 months. They're like, hey, I've been taking a PPI for 20 years. Listen, if you've been taking a PPI for 20 years, the chances of you not having gut dysbiosis is pretty much an impossibility.
Yeah.
Right.
And so recovered from acid, it's moving so fast. As someone who recovered from acid reflux, a 15 years of PPI, fluid reduction around meals, and supporting acid reflux.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they supported acid, drank less water with meals, etc. Which again, it might be that simple. Like some people, they can, because PPIs have a pretty short half-life. So when you take them out, in theory, those parietal cells are going to start producing acid on their own. It's just a matter of, can they produce enough for the environment that you need, right? So for women, I find that it's a little bit easier just because, again, their acid requirements tend to be lower than a male. They eat less food, they eat less protein, so on and so forth. But it's not like a one size fits all. Like it's, a lot of people have dysbiosis.
I like to support when I'm bringing somebody off of a PPI or they're coming to me from that and they have low stomach acid, most likely. I will also do some sort of pancreatic enzyme support as well, because their body probably also not producing that, because the way that hydrochloric acid and your pancreatic enzymes work together, it's a communication cycle. So normally they're already going to be low on stomach acid, but they'll be low in their ability to make digestive. So supporting on both realms of that is going to help a person increase their food, help work through that dysbiosis that's going on as well. So make sure that if you're coming off of a PPI, you're supporting those, not just taking hydrochloric acid.
Someone said, oh, Dennis asked me about the Illinois show. He said he was at the show and that I looked awesome and won the overall. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah.
Yes,
guys,
that is.
They're fucking dope. I said, if anyone has go on and look, they're dope.
Yeah, we did good. Yeah. Mission accomplished.
Yeah. You're coming in even leaner and tighter, I'm sure, in this next one, because you don't look like you've had any foot off the gas.
You like my face looks awesome.
Yeah. Where is your head on your body? It's like...
Oh, it's like the bobblehead?
Bobblehead, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the top of my head didn't get any smaller, but the bottom of my head got smaller. You know what I mean? So it's just it's just weird looking, and then it's like makes my mouth look bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Oh
I
well.
look too, so it's all
Yeah, it's like my teeth look big.
yeah, the first couple weeks off PBIs was literal hell. Yeah, and maybe you were working with somebody and maybe supported, but that is why I wanted to make sure that people know that you really want to support during those times, because chances are that body has not been working the way that it's needed to, and so you need to support for, I like to say, around 3 months, and then you shouldn't live on support like digestive enzyme support. If you are having to, probably something else on. I, with the exception, I guess, if you're pushing food, and that's just my personal opinion. But if you're pushing food, obviously you need to have that extra support. But definitely coming off PPIs.
So I work with a lot of guys that because I work with a lot of male bodybuilders, especially the guys that need to push food a lot. So they get a lot of acid reflux when they're
They,
eating.
yeah,
Why? Because they don't have enough acid to support their
the amount of,
requirements. So essentially what happens, and a lot of people don't understand, is like when the acid's too low, the peristalsis, those muscles are like overcompensating and trying to churn, and that creates that intra-abdominal pressure, and then pop, the flap comes open. So people mistake, like they're like, well, I'm getting splash up. I'm like, well, you're getting splash up because there's intra-abdominal pressure, and that's what's pushing it up. It's not that you have too much of it, it's that there's pressure, that esophageal flap is popping open, right? So that's going to happen when you're eating 6,000 calories and taking in 350 grams of protein. Like it's just a unnatural amount of food,
yeah,
so it does happen. But
yeah.
I'll tell you what, peeing is just like, I know it's random. I'm just like pee like every 5 minutes.
I know.
Just
Yeah.
hold it. Just like,
They,
oh,
do you have your gallon jug under your desk?
I don't, not right now.
Yeah.
I've been known to do that,
Yeah.
but I figured I would be a little more professional on the IG and not pee in a bottle while we were talking.
Right now, have you gotten to that place in prep where you're peeing at your desk?
Well, so no body fat. My adrenals are probably tanked, so my aldosterone level's low. So I'm just like pee, 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 pee
Yeah.
all the time.
Which is an of adrenal issues, guys. If you are chronically peeing, like when somebody's like, I get up 6 or 7 times a night to pee, it's like, hey, that's a sign. Or I'm always,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yep. You can't, you'll have a hard time maintaining hydration when those adrenals are tanked out for sure.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yep. Cool. So that's all that I have on my end. Where's our time? Yeah, that was 50 minutes. That's
we're
good.
good. Want to plug a little PEC real quick?
Plug what?
Plug the PEC dates and where to get tickets.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. So PEC, let me double check the dates because we have those two events. PEC is going to be on January. It's the last week of January, correct? Which is
Last
going to
weekend of
be
January.
the 27th and 28th. So that's going to be in Tampa. 2-day event. So generally Friday, like afternoon, evening, and then full day on Saturday. And then we have all kinds of fun afterwards. Try to. Really great lineup of speakers. We have some new speakers that we're rotating in this time. So on my page, you can see the lineup, event information, entry information, all that stuff. It's going to be a really great event. And then prior to that, the weekend prior, I believe, is the coaching consortium, which is completely online. That's going to be a full day plus an additional Sunday morning Q&A. And that's going to be a cool offering, for people that aren't going to travel and stuff. But I'll tell you, though, when you're thinking about the PEC, also, there's a lot more to it than just the speakers. There's networking. There's an atmosphere and an aura that you get to walk away with that's invaluable. It's not just like, hey, I'm going to watch these presentations. You'll get a lot more out of it than just that.
Especially because there's a lot of what we do is in online space. You know, we don't necessarily connect with people all the time. They're coaches in the field that you're coaching in, whether it's training, functional, you can really just connect outside of your like small network with people that maybe you wouldn't have connected before. And you would be surprised. Every single time I go, I'm like, I leave not only fired up, but like I leave your network, and I find those people in times when I need maybe advice on something that I don't know about. Like this person's better trained in endometriosis, something like that. Like the coach, having that network is really everything. That's how you can't just, there's no like textbook that's like, all right, functional coaching 101. Like we can do mentorships all we want. The continuous connection and the continuous to get you there, because things.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. Cool. Awesome.
All right.
I'll repost this so everyone can watch it, and you have a great rest of your night. I know you're a few hours behind, but it's getting later here, so be time to wind down.
So yeah, you enjoy the night, and I'm gonna enjoy what I'm gonna be pretending my cozy little night is. A wealth of
Awesome.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.